Chelsea versus Arsenal, the review. Sorry we are late with this video. I have been doing some West Ham analysis work over the weekend and on Monday, so this is coming a little bit later than usual. But we've got it anyway, so let's get into it. Here are the stats from the game, which I was actually really happy with in general. Like, Arteta came out with the quotes of Arsenal dominated this game. I completely disagree in every matter of the game that they dominated us. Territory-wise, which is something that Arsenal, what they've done lately is they've looked to sort of succeed possessional territory, possessional domination, sorry, and control for territory control. And that's something they did well last season anyway with territory, but they've gone to another level in trying to bring in those sort of duelists all over the park where they can make up ground with little passes and not as many passes to control a game. They still managed to have a bit more on the ball in this game, but that was more sort of inside their own half and the few times that they did manage to pin us in, which is what they look to do with that extra little bit of territory control, that 52-48. But that's very close. And Chelsea have managed to do that now in terms of territory control and pretty much go matching and like band for band with Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool now, which is a huge improvement from last season. So that's a massive thing for me, and I'm really happy about that. This was the player average positions from the game. Neto did switch halves, switch sides. So where Neto is here, you could imagine that this would be a little bit wider, and then you'd sort of see that four-man front line across the front, because obviously Neto did then go over to the right, and Madrid came on the left. Got the double pivot in midfield, Gusto, who then sort of pushed up, sometimes made a three in midfield, sometimes made the box alongside Palmer, and switched it about. This is how the team's lined up on paper. So again, you got that just so you can sort of visualise who is playing for who. I'll leave that up for a few seconds. You got Saka, Martinelli on the wings for Arsenal, Neto, Madueke for Chelsea. They had that midfield three regained of Ødegaard, Partey and Rice, their midfield from last season that managed to help them control games in such good fashion. The back four, probably their best back four, obviously Calafiori would probably come in for maybe White with Timber going over. But they're back, again, their best back four that would have been available last year had Timber have been able to play. So this was probably Arsenal's strongest team on paper that you could say maybe, as I said, striking Calafiori, because I would say Calafiori would get into this team. He's been very important in possession for Arsenal. So that's how the team's lined up. Chelsea again setting up. If you haven't, and I still recommend that you probably go watch it maybe before you watch the rest of this video, is watching the video that I did before this, because you can see how sort of close the prediction, and not prediction, but the opposition analysis that we did on Arsenal and how they're going to play, and how much of that translated into this game, because a lot of it was pretty much the same as what I said, what I was expecting to see. So we see that 3 again for Chelsea, that 4 for Arsenal, looking to block off any central access to Caicedo and Lavia. We had Rice sitting off on Gusto, so he's having to drop a little bit deeper to follow Gusto. And Partey, who was that main DM, but he was always following Palmer on that left-hand side. Again, something that I expected to happen, which would leave Gusto in a lot more space to receive between the lines. Here you can see it again, just with a few lines for the Arsenal players as well. The yellow line sort of showing that Gusto and Rice, Partey and Palmer, they're having to stay with them. Jackson dropping into that little gap between the two just to sort of keep them thinking, trying to cut off that lane, and also to make the centre-back sort of keep them on their toes in if they're going to have to step up into the middle. These two just playing in the cover shadows of the strikers, and Ødegaard, who's pressing as a striker. Colwell, at this point, was literally just stood on the ball, and he was just waiting for any sort of initiation from any of the players. As you can see, that passing lane out wide was still quite open at any time because of how sort of Gusto and even Palmer were pinning these two inside on either side. So that wide access was fairly good for Chelsea. I don't think they used it as much as they could have in this game, but I think it was on, which is again something that I mentioned in the preview. But something I really want to touch on today, because I touched on it a lot in the preview for Arsenal and saying how much I rate their rest defence. And it's these 3 for Chelsea, because I really do think, and I said this is the exact same 3 that I pointed out in my first video of the season against Manchester City. And I love Enzo Fernandez, and I'm going to do a video at the end of this week talking about the Caicedo, Lavia and Enzo Fernandez sort of you could call it a dilemma. I don't think it's a dilemma. I think it's a brilliant thing to have. I think having those three profiles is a brilliant blend. But we're going to do a video for that on Friday, and I'm going to put quite a bit of work into that video throughout the week to make it as good a video as possible, discussing all three, their profiles, how they help the team, and how their minutes can be managed, etc., etc. So do let me know if you'd like to see that video on Friday, because that's what I'm going to be working on throughout the week. Let me know what you think of that in the comments down below. But these three, with Kukurea in the team as well, might just have one of the best rest defenses in the league in terms of having this two here for recovery, Cole and Fofana, but then squeezing teams in and being able to trap teams in their own half with those three in the rest defense. It happened against City. We was able to pin them in at times because of these three and their ability to sort of scrap up and hoover up second balls in and around this part of the pitch, which then allows you to sustain that pressure in their half and really actually get things going for the team. So we're going to touch on those sort of what I like to call counter pressing nets and how you set them up. We're going to talk about that later in the video, because I think someone that was getting a bit of stick was Pedro Neto when he got into wide areas. So we're going to touch on that. But here's that shape again. As you can see, the two at the base, the three sort of pinning them in. But this is in possession. But the idea being that if that ball does sort of break in and around this central area where my arrow is, you've got Gusto, Palmer, and Jackson who can all converge from this way. And then you've got these three who are all going to converge from this direction. And you're looking with that net of players to converge on the ball together to quickly win it and then break again and use it almost as a transition attack. This is the example of Arsenal's rest defence, which again we spoke about in the preview. But look, this was the space that I pointed out in the video that's going to be open in the preview video. When White and Timber's actually up here, but when they invert, a lot of times they invert both fullbacks now, Arsenal, and they look to have Gabriel and Saliba as the sort of cover players, sort of like what I just said with Cole and Fofana, right? Which leaves a lot of space in these channels to run into. And when Chelsea won the ball back, especially from those second ball duels, the idea was to hit that space as quickly as possible before White and Timber could then get back into position. So what we saw here is, again, and this is just one example, there was quite a few examples within the game, but Neto peeling into that space as quickly as possible and Chelsea looking to hit that really quickly with as little passes as possible to not allow them to get back into any straight shape or structure. Here's that rest defense again. As I said, they're the three inverted. So you got White all inverted into here. The two inverted, sorry. White inverted into here alongside Party and then Timber as well. Actually, I don't think this is Rice at this point. I think because Timber, if you look, he's up here. But again, they're looking with that 2-3 base setup, and then they've sort of got Timber and Rice sort of mixing and matching between the two, which is something they did against Liverpool or Man City. I can't remember which game it was. I think it might have been Man City actually. That's something they did in that game too. Chelsea looked to sit in quite a good 4-4-2 structure, looking to sort of zonal mark and then go from that sort of zonal into a man-to-man press when they could. It was very much in our own half. We'll sit in that 4-4-2 mid-block, and then when we do go and pressure them, usually from their goal kick scenarios, that's when we'll go really sort of like man for man and look to force them long, which again is something I thought we did really well. Another example of Neto getting into that space behind Ben White. That's the example of Chelsea forcing them long. And I think they did really well in this game to be aggressive on these Arsenal goal kicks, force Arsenal to go direct from goal kicks, which is something they usually do anyway. They're quite easy to force direct from goal kicks. And then once we did that, we was then able to win those second balls because look, Chelsea have then forced Arsenal into one side of the pitch. Chelsea are now converging. You've got Colwill. He's coming up into this space to watch Havertz. And they're really trying to trap inside that area of the pitch so that you're either going to win the ball in here and turn it into a quick attacking scenario, or that ball is going to go long from one of the Arsenal players. And then you've got the likes of Fofana, who is really eating up those duels for Chelsea, and even the fullbacks who were doing really well at winning those duels as well. So that's exactly what Chelsea were looking to do, and I think they did that really, really well. And I think that's something we've done really well all season, which is why there is defensive frailties in this team, but there's quite a few things that I think deserve some praise. I think one of them is how we sort of these scenarios. I think we've picked up really quickly how to press from these scenarios and force it long, and then we trust our players to win those duels, right? So I think that's a good thing. I just wanted to highlight this scenario because obviously this is the Gusto chance. He just, like, every time we got into these positions, and this is why I wanted to see as much sort of early wide access as possible, because when Neto got the ball, he was just toying with White. You've got him throwing his legs up in the air. He's really like he's working his legs, which is exactly what the commentators were saying. And then he gets that ball right into this area of the pitch with a beautiful cross. And Gusto should score, he really should. But this was just one option of when Neto did this. And this is why I think later in the game he was getting a little bit of stick for not being as direct on this left hand side against Ben White. But we've got an example coming up, which I'm going to show you, which is going to relate back to that counter pressing nets that we spoke about earlier. Um, this is again just another example of hitting the channels early. This time it's Jackson running into that sort of space in the channel, but it's the exact same premise of that's where the space is, and we need to hit that early before they have any time. And whilst these gaps are really sort of they've widened and those distances are bigger, can we get over the top quickly? And this is exactly what I mean when what I was saying in the game, when these players have got forward momentum and they're moving forwards into this position, and Chelsea are in their 4-4-2 out possession shape. Where's the space going to be in these channels? Casado, can you hit them early? And that's just one example. Casado, can Palmer hit it early if he's sort of dropped in here? Can Lavia hit it early? Can one of the centre backs hit it early? That was the idea. And again, in the preview, touched on that a lot. Fofana, brilliant. Like, close, might be my man of the match, honestly. He was so good. I think if Kukurea hadn't locked up Saka the way he did, Fofana would have got man of the match outright. Because I just think, or Neto as well, but Fofana was absolutely excellent. Defensively dueling, but also just this confidence on the ball. And this is something that Chelsea need in the build up. Because what you'll always find is with these sort of pressing systems, at this point, Arsenal is sort of pressing in a 1-4-1 with Partey a lot deeper away here with Palmer. But what you can do when you do this is if you have centre backs that can drive with the ball, and this is something that the Centurion Man City team had a lot of, they had a lot of carriers that could carry out from the back. And they had high progressive carry numbers from defence. And when you have high progressive carry numbers from defence, you can often unlock areas of the pitch that you won't be able to unlock with just normal passing strategies, especially if teams are good with their pressing structure. So what Fofana does here is he essentially just takes 5 players out the game like that. Because you got that 5-man press of Arsenal, and he's literally straight through this gap, athletic, and he just sprinting onto their backline to the point where now Chelsea are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you got Neto out here 6 versus Arsenal's 5 in defence. So you've now got a 6v5 overload, which you wouldn't have had if Fofana hadn't burst through that himself. And Fofana did this a few times in the game, and it's something that he really adds to this team. So on top of the amazing defensive dueling of Fofana, some really nice sort of like clever little passes around the corner into Lavia and Casado as well. But just that athleticism to drive with the ball forwards, a huge asset to this team, a real huge asset to this team, and I think he deserves so much credit. Again, you got that 4-4-2 shape, just wanted to highlight that. And again, this is Casado hitting it really early into Jackson. This time it's not actually the channel, but the idea is the same of to go early in behind where the space is. Because as you can see, you got the 3 here who are trying to. Their job is just basically if one of these guys gets the ball, they're going to try and put pressure on it. So Casado goes early over the top to Jackson, who can make that run, and he sort of ends up over this side. So it is sort of away in. It's towards the channel, but not quite. But the premise of the idea is the same. Here's that sort of Chelsea pressure again. This time it's sort of looking a bit more like a diamond, but Lavia can drop off. At this point, he's just sort of fronting off the Arsenal midfield to stop any central progression at that point, and then he'll drop in alongside Casado, where it will look a little bit more like a 4-4-2. But again, I thought the structure for Chelsea's defence was really good throughout the game. Again, Ben White not really in position here to defend the ball. Put him here. Can you hit Kukurea? This was right at the end of the half. I actually think this, again, should have been a better chance. I think Neto should take a bit of a more positive touch. He sort of slowed the ball down and looked to pass it into the box. Instead, I think at this point, with his speed, I think he should be really sort of driving at it in this last chance of the game and using that speed. And I know that the timings here, that says 48:05. That's for the first half. This is now the second half, as you can see from the change of sides. But again, look at that counter press. Look at the net that Chelsea have set here. Kukurea, Lavia, Casado. They have trapped that Arsenal team behind the ball. These are their 2 most advanced players here. And Chelsea are now able to sustain pressure. And what happens here is a few steps later, Casado, his movement, if we can see here, he's here at the minute. He moves over as the ball sort of comes over into this area of the pitch. And he traps off Martinelli, where Martinelli has to come inside and watch Casado so that that wide access is on. And we can get that 1v1 with Madueke to go at Timber. And these are the sorts of situations I want to see a little bit more of because Chelsea were able to get these fronted off players and sort of block off those lanes to get early wide access. But I just don't think Chelsea used it enough. Again, the 4-4-2 structure, I liked it. I thought we was in a good shape. Again, ball side a little bit deeper. Neto, and you've got good enough sort of coverage that they can get to the ball if it is switched over. By the time that makes its way over, you can adjust. Neto can drop off. Madueke can put a bit of pressure on, and it can move in tandem really nicely. This is the scenario that I was referring to earlier. So it's these scenarios, like the commentary was very sort of, I wouldn't say it's even harsh on Neto, but they were a bit upset that Neto wasn't going at his man every single time. But what he does here, I think, is really, really clever. Is they're in good shape right now. But these four, they're going to get back. Chelsea don't really have an overload here. Neto is fast, and if he can get to the byline and do something, fair enough. But White has got good distance on Neto to sort of stop him and slow him down. By the time he slowed him down, they've got very good coverage back in the sort of around the box in the middle of the pitch. So what Neto does is he drives the ball forwards, engages White enough, but also allows Lavia, Cucurella, and Casado to join the play. So this is literally what, 8 seconds later, and he's allowed them to join the play. And now what you've done is you've set up that counter pressing net. So as opposed to going at them, losing the ball, and having those distances stretched, what instead you've done is you've compacted that, you've got into their half, and you've set that net early. So now Chelsea can have a little bit of sustained pressure. And if that ball does break in and around here, you've got your three best duelists on the pitch. Maybe Fofana as well, but he's a bit more of a recovery defender in this system. You got these three who can all just converge on the ball, and this is how Chelsea were able to sort of stay in that and sustain pressure in the Arsenal half. And they did have good sort of periods of the game where they was able to do this. If you look at the momentum chart on SofaScore, but also if you just watch the game back and just like watch it with your eyes, you can see that Chelsea clearly had moments in the game where they were able to do this. And again, this is just the counter pressing net that you can see. So Fofana, he's all because Havertz is that last man. Colwell is basically he's out of picture. He can just be the cover player. He's there to cover. He can sweep behind Fofana. Fofana can go all the way with Havertz, and he'll beat Havertz in a race anyway. He's got that on him. So he knows that he can step up with Havertz, be aggressive. So if that ball does come into feet with Havertz, he can be really tight on him. He can either force a sort of loss of possession, or he could even foul him if he really needs to stop that ball up to Martinelli. But you've got lots of options. Fofana can be aggressive, and you can really set up this net to force Arsenal back. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if it doesn't. This is where Chelsea lose the ball. There's a lot of sort of talk about this line, but I do think losing the ball here was very poor. I think instead of going in this sort of area, I think it should have just been recycled backwards and out. I don't think this was the time to sort of, especially when they have a four-man press in that area of the pitch. I don't think that was the man to try and be tight and intricate at the time, to be tight and intricate. But again, poor, really poor from Chelsea, really on the line. This is something that we've seen Chelsea do quite a few times and get caught when they try to hold this line on their 18-yard box. Colwell drops off. I don't think it's Colwell's fault. Madueke, of course, he's way out of the possession. He should be tracking back as well. But it's just one of those ones. And then again, I think Sanchez should do better from this. But fair enough, Martinelli gets the goal. And then Chelsea are behind. But this, I think Enzo Fernandez deserves a lot of credit for this as well. But Neto, obviously, outstanding. But something that just I really want to really quickly touch on with Enzo Fernandez that people don't quite sort of give him the credit for always. This pass, of course, it looks easy, but it's also very easy to just recycle and play slow. But what Enzo does by putting it in this gap is he's not giving Neto a choice on what to do. He is setting that play for Neto and saying, go get it. And he's putting him in that direction because that pass is forcing Neto into space where Neto's now got to be instinctive. He's not going to be able to slow the play down like he sometimes did out wide, which again I do think he did to a good degree at times. But he's now in this area where he's going to get the ball. Enzo's put it on a sixpence in the sense of right now, Neto, now just go and do something special. You're already got forward momentum, and just unbelievable, brilliant finish from Neto, and who was again outstanding in this game. Probably his best game in a Chelsea shirt so far, especially because of the occasion, but also just his defensive work rate was excellent throughout the game as well. And of course, gets a really important goal. Very, very, very good. Big part of the game. And then the last bit that I wanted to touch on is this, because we saw Reece James in that sort of right attacking mid position for the last 10 minutes of the game, which is something that if you go and watch my fullbacks video, which is I think 2 videos back now, we sort of spoke about Malo Gusto and why I think he's really important tactically. So I do really suggest going and watching that if you've been confused about the Malo Gusto situation in and his positioning so far this season. But Reece James, obviously, if he can get fit enough, he has other sort of qualities that he can bring to the team in this role, because he is a little bit better on the ball in terms of ball striking in those areas, a little bit of better final ball quality, putting balls into the box in those half spaces. He's strong on the ball. He's got lots and like good in the air. So if he arrives, maybe he scores that header that Gusto didn't. There's positives to his game. I'm a big fan of Gusto, by the way. It's nothing on that. I literally go watch that video. I waxed lyrical about him. But of course, Reece James brings you that. But I love this little dynamic where, and this is something they did a lot at Leicester last season, not with the fullbacks, but it just depends whoever was in the number 8 or the half space and whoever was out wide. It was you'd make that initial run into the half space. If that ball can't go in there, you continue your run outside to drag one of these men away from the centre of the pitch, because at the minute Neto's facing 2 men. But once James makes this run round here, Erdegaard's followed all the way, and he's actually got a little bit more space to more or less go 1v1. Yes, Erdegaard has now checked off back into the middle, but this gives Neto that tiny bit more space to sort of clip that ball in. It's actually a really good ball into the box, and Chelsea don't manage to get anything on it to fashion a chance from it. But again, this is something Neto does really well, those half space crosses, and it's these little movements from the winger and number 8 that really, that's the next sort of step I want to see from Chelsea throughout the season. I want to slowly see it integrated and becoming a bit more fluid. I think it's something Chelsea do try in games, but I just don't think it's not sort of it's not an instinct right now. So I think that's one of the next things to sort of drill into the team. But the overall structure is far more important. This is just an extra little tweak, not even a tweak, but just like an extra detail that I'd like to see a little bit more of. End of the game, this is what we saw. The ground, this is the duels, so Chelsea the green side. So I think the ground duels is a massive part of this game. Like I said, I think winning those duels was really important. One more of the duels, one more of the ground duels, and just overall, I think that's a really important factor to winning this game. And then if you don't already follow Markar stats, I just pulled this passing network from his, and he makes these for most games. So go follow that up on Twitter. The at's just here. Look, Markar stats. But again, this is just the passing networks from the game. You can see Jackson was dropping in quite deep. Madueke was the outlet for a lot of the time. Palmer in that more advanced position, and you can just see a few little bits that are sort of quite interesting. Fofana a little bit higher up, Cole as that cover defender, and also the one just breaking those lines down with 70 passes, as you can see, the most from any Chelsea player, which is expected because he is the one who orchestrates from the back. So that's all we've got for today. I might do a stream tomorrow as well to sort of do it all on the tactics board a little bit more and go over some last details and maybe answer a few of your guys' questions in the comments. So if you have any questions, do leave them down below so I can get to them. And also let me know if you want to see that video at the end of the week for the midfield situation of Caicedo, Lavia and Enzo Fernandez, and I'll get working on that ASAP. All your questions from the Arsenal game, and also just let me know what you thought of the game. Was you happy with the result? Do you think we did enough to win? Was you upset about any sort of instances in the game? Was there anything that you think Chelsea could have done better? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Please do drop a like, as it does really help me out, and it really helps the channel to grow and progress. And subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.